Jeremiah chapter 9. Disobedience brings God's judgment. The pitifully wicked and immoral behavior of God's once chosen people had at last reached its terminal extent. The horrible punishment which their apostasy so richly deserved was soon to be executed upon the degenerate reprobate nation. In this chapter, we see Jeremiah, a man of sorrows, weeping day and night at the thought of the impending calamity. We see him speaking in a sorrowful language to a hardened and rebellious people, but to no effect. The chapter can be divided as follows. 1. The people in Jerusalem deserve God's punishment, verses 1 to 9. 2. The desolation of the land and the dispersion of the people, verses 9 to 15. 3. An appeal to trust in God, verses 16 to 22. 4. True wisdom and false circumcision, verses 23 to 26. The people in Jerusalem deserve God's punishment, verses 1 to 9. Verse 1. Oh, that my head were waters and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. The prophet shows the great compassion that he had toward his people and sympathizes with the calamities of his people that he saw to hang over them. Seeing that he could never sufficiently lament the destruction, he wished to have a fountain open in his eyes that he may weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of his people. Jeremiah felt that tears would not be sufficient to deplore the miserable estate of his people. Only a fountain of tears could express the inward grief and sorrow in his mind as he thinks of the greatness and horribleness of the destruction. The spiritual adultery and treachery repulsed Jeremiah. So, in verse 2, Jeremiah longed for a lodging place in the wilderness where he could go to get away from his fellow countrymen for the below reasons. 1. That he might have an opportunity to give vent to his grief being alone. 2. To show his sympathy for the people by utterly looking unto God, being alone. 3. So he might not be an eyewitness of the miseries of his people. Verse 3. And they bent their tongues like their bow for lies, but they are not valiant for the truth upon the earth, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they know not me, saith the Lord. The speech of the people was loaded with falsehood, slander, and every evil, and Jeremiah here used the metaphor of a bow to describe their tongue, which was directed against persons to injure them and slander them. They are not valiant for the truth upon the earth, that is, they are bold in sin and courageous to support and defend their lies. But the truth they neither patronize nor support. They proceed from evil to evil. They go on from bad to worse. They do not know the Lord. In verse 4, two critical advice had been given so that the people shall not be deceived or betrayed. The advice was given because the whole society was corrupt, deceitful, fraudulent, and wickedly crafty. 1. Trust ye not in any brother, for every brother will utterly supplant. The word supplant is an allusion to Jacob who took hold of Esau's heel at his birth. Genesis 25:26. And after that came his brother Jacob out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel. Every brother Israelite behaved like a Jacob. 2. Be careful of your neighbor, for every neighbor will walk with slanders, going about spreading lies, backbiting, and disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. Verse 5 says that they weary themselves to commit iniquity. Lying, deceit, treachery, adultery, and idolatry were everyday sins in Judah. They were strenuous, laborious, and indefatigable in committing sin and satisfying their physical passions, which resulted in wearying themselves and weakening their body. This shows their great folly and stupidity. Verse 6. Thine habitation is in the midst of deceit. Through deceit they refuse to know me, saith the Lord. These are the words of the Lord to the prophet, showing what sort of people he dwelt among and how cautiously and prudently he should act so as not to be ensnared by them. Hypocrisy being a reigning and governing sin in them, they liked not the true knowledge of God and refused to worship Him. Deceit prevented them from having relationship with the Lord. Their ignorance of God was willful. Therefore, the Lord of hosts in verse 7 says that He will put them in a furnace of affliction and see if this will be a means of purging away their dross and purifying them. Matthew Henry stated that those who do not know the Lord as their lawgiver will be compelled to know Him as their judge. Verse 8 says, their tongue is as an arrow shot out. The tongue executes what they have designed and planned. As an arrow out of the bow moves swiftly and comes with great force, out comes deceitful words to draw his neighbors into snares and defraud him. The Lord had no choice. He had to punish the nation that was not honest. Verse 9. The mourning song for Judah, verses 10 to 22. The Lord will ruin Judah, verses 10-11. Verse 10 talks about the weeping and the wailing because of the forthcoming desolation upon Jerusalem and Judea. The mountains, which once teemed with life, and the pasture lands, here called wilderness, which once supported numerous herds of sheep and cattle, all of this shall be burnt up by the Babylonians. The rabbis tell us that after the people were carried captive to Babylon, the land was burnt up with sulfur and salt. The land shall be so utterly devastated and desolated that neither beast nor bird shall be able to live in it. The walls and houses of the well-fortified holy city of Jerusalem shall be thrown down and become heaps of stones and rubbish. The city itself shall be without inhabitants and as a den of dragons. Because she made the Lord's house a den of thieves, Jeremiah 7:11, her dwelling place will be a den of dragons. Dragons would prowl freely without fear of human interference. God would turn the city into a wilderness. Reason for the Lord to ruin Judah, verses 12 to 16. The question asked in verse 12 is, what is the reason that the land perisheth and is burnt up like a wilderness that none passeth through? God sought a wise man among them who could understand the Lord's revelation about the coming desolation and destruction of Judah and convey the reason to his people. But God found none. So the Lord, through the prophet, provided the answer to his own question, stating the reasons for the upcoming destruction. The answer is specific and sufficient. 1. They have forsaken my law, which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, neither walked therein. Verse 13. The law mentioned here is the complete law of Moses. The Israelites had promised to do these things at Mount Sinai, Exodus 19:4-8, but failed to now. 2. They have walked after the imagination of their own heart and after Balaam, which their fathers taught them. Verse 14. It shows their tenacious sticking to their idolatry. Instead of following God's counsel in the scriptures, they blindly follow their fathers' counsel, precepts and examples, which is the worst guide. The fertility god Baal is the head of the Canaanite pantheon. The Baal fertility cults were heavily oriented towards sexual immorality. Balaam, plural of Baal, expressed his supposed manifold powers. Verse 15. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will feed them, even this people, with wormwood, and give them water of gall to drink. God calls himself the Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, that is, the God of armies above and below, in the heaven and in the earth, in opposition to Balaam, the idols of the Gentiles. It signifies that though there be many who are called gods, but there is one Lord who is God over all and the God of Israel. Jeremiah then concludes that God would take vengeance and speaks in a figurative language. Wormwood is a plant belonging to the species of Artemisia, which has a very bitter juice, and gall was a poisonous bitter herb. The terms were often used together to indicate bitter afflictions and deepest sorrow. Some say that it was a plan to purify and cleanse them. That is, because of the people's sin, God Himself would punish, and that their punishment would be very severe, though just. Verse 16 tells about their twofold punishment. It was a fulfillment of Leviticus 26:33, which is the penalty for the violation of God's covenant. 1. He will scatter them also among the heathen, whom neither they nor their fathers have known. Their fathers taught them idolatry. Therefore, the children shall be scattered to a land which neither their fathers nor they have known. It is a circumstance greatly aggravating their captivity. 2. He will send a sword after them till he has consumed them. It signifies that not even their flight shall be safe. The enemy would pursue the people of Judah and would kill them in war. The women weep on behalf of Judah. Verses 17 to 22. Verse 17. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Consider ye, and call for the mourning women that they may come, and send for cunning women that they may come. Since the threatenings of God had not sufficiently moved the hearts of the people, the prophet gives a dramatic picture of what takes place in times of mourning at a horrible destruction. The Lord instructed to summon the professional mourners to come forward and pitch upon some form of mourning that may be suitable to their condition. It was an ancient custom of the Hebrews to call for mourning women at funerals who make lamentations by beating themselves with disheveled hair and naked breasts to bewail the dead for which they received pay. These skilled hired mourners, by their loud outcries, insincere tears, modulated voice, and doleful songs, excite a real passion of sorrow in others and make others run down with tears with their voice and gestures of frantic grief. In Mark 5:38, Jesus had to make such women who were crying loudly when Jairus' daughter had died to leave Jairus' house. The thought in verse 19 and 20 is 1. That a terrible calamity of death and destruction is approaching Israel. 2. The demand for skillful mourners would be greater than the supply to bewail the tragedy. Therefore, every woman should teach her daughters wailing and neighbor lamentations in order to meet the demand. In short, the meaning is that no woman, old or young, would be exempt from this mourning, as all would be implicated in a common sorrow. For God's judgment would prevail not only in the city, but would penetrate into every house. Verse 21. For death is come up into our windows, and is entered into our palaces, to cut off the children from without, and the young men from the streets. The unavoidableness of the ruin is expressed metaphorically. The Chaldeans would scale their walls, break in at their windows, and destroy them. By these words, he sets forth the dreadfulness of the calamity. For the youths would not be able to defend themselves by their own strength. Their vigor, however strong, would not protect them, nor would children and infants be spared. Death entered the windows to cut off the children and the youth, that they can no more play or walk in the streets. There will be no safety anywhere. Verse 22. Speak, thus saith the Lord, even the carcasses of men shall fall as dung upon the open field, and as a handful after the harvestmen, and none shall gather them. This alludes to the manner of reaping corn in the field. The harvestman, after having cut enough to fill his hand, put the rest down. The binders, following after, collected the handfuls that were cut and bound them in sheaves. The leftovers were then gleaned or gathered by the poor. Here we see death as a harvestman. Death is represented as having cut down the inhabitants of the land as the harvestmen do the corn. So great was the slaughter that the corn, after being cut, would have no binders and gleaners. They would lie neglected to rot on the ground. Similarly, there will be none to bury the dead, that is, to gather up these handfuls. So they shall fall as dung upon the open field. True wisdom. Verse 23-24. Verse 23. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might, let not the rich man glory in his riches. The three things on which men most pride themselves, that is, wisdom, might, and riches, are shown in this verse to be proved vain. The intention of the words here is to show that neither the wise man with all his art and craftiness, nor the mighty man by his strength, nor the rich man through his riches could save themselves from the destruction before prophesied of. The long prophecy of judgment had reached its climax. Now there comes the conclusion of the whole matter, that the only way of salvation is to renounce all reliance on the wisdom, greatness, and wealth, and to glory only in knowing the Lord. This is a concise summary of true religion. False circumcision, verse 25-26. Verse 25. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will punish all them which are circumcised with the uncircumcised. Jeremiah used an oxymoron to describe the Jews who were uncircumcised in heart and circumcised in body. An oxymoron is a figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction. Physical circumcision alone, without the devoted and obedient heart that was supposed to accompany such a sign of the covenant, was worthless. Verse 26 tells about all the pagan nations who were uncircumcised. This verse is mentioned to show that the circumcised Jews were no better than the uncircumcised and that they would all be punished together. Jeremiah chapter 9. Questions. Jeremiah chapter 9. Answers.